Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, everyone, and happy holidays. My name is Joel Ostrow. I'm in for Edwin today, and I have a great show. I'm really excited to bring to you. Thought at first I'd give a brief introduction of myself to try to give a little context for why I have the topics and the guests on today that I will. For those of you who have not heard me before on this station, I'm a political science professor at Benedictine University. My primary expertise is Russian politics, and have done a lot of commenting and writing about the war in Ukraine. As a result of my expertise on Russia, I'm an expert on democracy and democratic institutions and how democracies fail. So given that, I thought today I wanted to cover a little bit on all three of those topics. In the first hour, we'll be talking to two different activists who have been involved in the immigration enforcement actions by the federal government here in the Chicago area, the immigration issues, the kidnappings, and the consequences and what some people are doing will be the focus of the first hour. In the second hour, I have two eminent scholars of the U.S. Constitution, actually constitutional scholars generally, to talk about the consequences and maybe the future of our Constitution, given recent actions by the Supreme Court and the current regime in Washington. And then in the third hour, we will turn to the situation in Ukraine with a remarkable hero who is saving lives every day on the Ukrainian front, and she will be joining us from Ukraine. So first, again, coming back to the issue around ICE, since the withdrawal of Customs and Border Patrol agents that have been deployed here, the frenzied actions and the news around it seems to have receded, but that doesn't mean that ICE actions have receded. And we're joined by Scott Sakiyama, an Oak Park resident and attorney. He is an organizer and has been an organizer of the protests at the Broadview Detention Center. He's also a rapid response team member. Scott was detained by ICE outside of his child's elementary school in Oak Park while he was warning the community about the ICE presence and actions in the area. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We have not yet met in person, but we have met virtually a few times now. And first, thank you for all you do. And before we start, are you a practicing attorney, and what area of law do you work in?
Sure. First, thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and to talk with you today. I am a practicing attorney. My practice has largely focused on civil litigation, typically in the consumer financial services space, and some in the area of privacy. I see.
So I had this as a potential question, and now I'd like to ask you, before we get into what's going on now, what propelled you personally into the activism around the immigration enforcement?
Sure. So, 80 years ago, the federal government incarcerated my family during World War II because they were either immigrants from Japan or they had, parents who were immigrants from Japan. And the effects of that abuse of federal power have really continued through the generations in my family. And so I think that the immigrant community is something that, I feel a connection with. And also, my family was fortunate that they had a neighbor who held their property for them and then gave it back so they didn't have to do like a fire sale. And so, I think that is a strong example of members of the community stepping up to take care of each other, and which I think is something that we've seen over the last few months here in Chicago when it comes to federal immigration enforcement activity.
There were so many stories like that during the Second World War era. Was your family on the West Coast at the time?
They were. They were in the Los Angeles area. They spent some time, or they were then sent ultimately to Gila River, Arizona. Which is on a Native American reservation just outside Phoenix there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that background. That sort of, I sort of wondered. Because the nature of your activity has been much more central, I guess, or it just had a personal feel to it, different from what many of the others out on the streets has been. So thank you for that. If you could, can you sort of speak a little to the current situation regarding immigration enforcement in the Chicago area? Has there been a noticeable decline in seizures of people, for example, over the last few weeks, or is it continuing apace? What is the same and what has changed from, through your lens?
Sure. So from what I'm seeing, with a couple notable exceptions, the activity that we've seen has significantly decreased since Border Patrol, and in particular, the commander, Greg Bovino, left Chicago and went to Charlotte and then New Orleans. And I say with a couple notable exceptions, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was one day that we saw more activity, I think, across the city. And then I think maybe 2 weeks ago, Greg Bovino was in town.
He came back, right? Surprise appearance.
Right. Yeah, and he was around for about 2 days. He was up north in some of the northern suburbs. He was in Cicero, little village. He stopped for gas at Forest Park, very very close to where I live. But those days we did see escalated activity.
And how about at Broadview? What's the situation there?
So I think the protests have, I think, been less well attended. I think that's the product of a number of factors. The weather also, generally speaking, it does feel like there is less activity there for the most part on behalf of or on behalf of the federal government there. Also, too, there was sort of I would say there was a pretty sharp decline following an incident in mid-November where a number of faith leaders were really very violently assaulted by the Cook County Sheriff and the state police, as well as the Broadview police there. But again, I think that I think it's largely a product of the holidays and the decreased immigration activity in general.
But the center is still pretty full, is my understanding. Do we know really what the status is inside the building?
I think I don't think we do.
We never did, really, did we?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe that the attorneys representing the class of individuals that were being detained there did win at least some access, but I have not really seen any reporting on what they've been able to find out or what the current status there is. Are
you yourself still going out there at all, or is it really?
I've been a few times recently, not quite the same cadence, but I anticipate that picking back up again as we sort of get through the holidays here.
Do they still have the streets blocked off, or do they still have that protest zone?
They do.
Is the curfew still in place? All that crap from the mayor?
Yes. I believe there's been some modifications. But I mean, to your point, the mayor of Broadview and what they call the Unified Command with the local police forces have established this. They've turned the First Amendment on its head, right? Yeah. Where instead of needing to require good reason to restrict First Amendment rights, they are basically starting from, we will tell you when and how and where you can exercise your First Amendment rights. And I think some of the barriers have been removed. I think the police force is a little bit smaller than it was. But I think that if you saw a return to some of the crowd size, you'd see a ramp up pretty quickly from the unified command there.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Scott. You had quite obviously direct interactions with police at all levels. I'm assuming with state police, with Cook County Sheriff's Police, with Broadview Police. I'm assuming in other locations with Chicago Police. I'm not sure which question I want to ask first because they're all connected.
Right.
Let me start with this one. How would you characterize the four different branches there in terms of their behavior, how you and other protesters experience them and their orientation to you, starting from the state police and like working your way down the tiers? Can you sort of characterize how they've been given what they're supposed to do according to the Illinois Trust Act and the rulings by various courts and judges in the area, the circuit court judge most notably, statements by the governor, like given that context of our rights and the legal systems or the judicial systems statements about the need to protect those rights. Can you comment on those four different branches of police as you encountered them and as your people, like those who you sort of lead and work with other protesters and activists? What has been your experience? Maybe start with the state police.
Sure. So the state police, I think I would say if I was going to rank them, I would say are the most professional. That being said, on October 3rd, when Kristi Noem was in town, the state police worked hand in hand with Greg Bovino to suddenly clear protesters from two zones that they had been allowed to be in from the three previous hours with little to no warning. They've threatened chemical munitions, but have rarely used them. They were involved in the same incident, in that mid-November incident where faith leaders were brutalized. And so on their own, I think that they are probably, if I had to deal with a branch of law enforcement, they're probably who I would choose to deal with. But some of the issue here is that some of what we've observed is the unified command. It is unclear who is actually in charge. I think the Broadview police appear to have an outsized influence, perhaps there, and the Broadview police seem wildly inequipped to handle the situation there. For I think both reasons of they have a relatively small police force, which is how the sheriff and the Illinois State Police were brought in, but then also just from just understanding what their goals are and what they're trying to do there. The Cook County sheriffs, I'd say that a number of them led the charge on really the brutal tactics that the faith leaders were subject to.
Thank you, Tony Preckwinkle. Keep going. Sorry.
Yes, that is
why does this not surprise me? But anyway.
On October 3rd, when they were involved, when Noem was there, and one of my friends reached out to a member of the Cook County board in real time and said, "Hey, we're here, and the sheriffs are helping push around the protesters," and the response was, "Perhaps we can form a commission." So there's a number of elected leaders, I think, who are not really set up to deal with this. I also, individually in talking to some of the sheriffs, I've had a number of instances where they express that they appreciate what the protesters are doing, that they think that they should be out there. but I think some of the leadership there. There's one commander in particular that's often there. I think he's a deputy sheriff or deputy chief. I believe his name's Joe Schofield. And my understanding is that he has a background in the Marines and in either Iraq or Afghanistan. And there's video of him on the day that the clergy were beat up, where they've sort of been pushed back into a line, but he leads this charge to go into a crowd and grab the pastor from Evanston and sort of have him slammed to the ground. And it looks like tactics that really feels just more military than law enforcement. So
except, of course, our military is supposed to be defending our constitutional rights from threats foreign, but we'll leave that aside. So the sheriff's force you found to be the most aggressive, threatening. What about and the Broadview police, the least equipped, you said?
Yeah, I think so. The Broadview police, there are a number of them that appear to be very much police officers that are focused on making sure you're compliant with what they tell you to do. And just by way of an example, on October 14th, I was recording ICE vehicles as they were entering and exiting the facility, which is something that the governor has asked us to do, right?
Correct. Explicitly, right. Yeah. And to post it to a site that they created.
Yes, exactly. And the mayor of Broadview had issued her, free speech curfew. And so the entrance and exit is actually very close to the border of Maywood. So a friend and I positioned ourselves so that we were on the sidewalk in Maywood. Yeah. And we also took the position that we were not protesting, but that we were recording law enforcement, which has its own constitutional rights. But nevertheless, Officer Williams from the Broadview Police told me that the Mayor of Broadview's executive order restricted me from taking photographs of the license plates while I was standing in Maywood. And so he arrested me that day while I was in Maywood. But again, it was really, I asked him, I just said, you're not really contending that the executive order of Broadview applies here, and you're not going to arrest me for it, are you? And he said, well, why don't you find out? And so I found out, but that was dismissed pretty quickly. But they seem just very focused on achieving compliance. So it's really unfortunate the way that's turned out.
Any experience with Chicago police, CPD?
I haven't yet had had experience with them in the context of either a rapid response or a protest in the Broadview area. In early summer there were some protests downtown, and those were fairly uneventful with CPD. There was they tried to prevent the blocking of major streets, et cetera, but it was relatively calm. But I would just say, just throwing in there in the early days prior to October 3rd, so for most of September, the encounters were directly with federal agents, and that was just unlike anything I've ever seen. The level of violence and unpredictability, and I think that a lot of people who had been to a lot of protests, just sort of the norms or expectations that they had come to have, simply did not exist with the federal agents.
Just for context for listeners, the last two times I hosted spent really a month and then I think almost 6 weeks trying to get anyone from the governor's office, from state police, from the Cook County Sheriff's, or from Chicago Police Department to come on air to speak to what was going on, to take questions, but also to present their own positions. Blanket refusal from all, most disappointing from the governor's office. Scott, I know you'll agree, the governor's words have been beautiful. His actions have been non-existent in terms of insisting on enforcement of the Illinois Trust Act, defending constitutional rights, preventing abuse by federal authorities or his purview, Illinois police, and the same is true of Cook County President Preckwinkle. We also did try to get her the last time. So much of a blanket refusal. I didn't even try for this show to get anyone from there because the you don't even get a reply saying, no, we don't want to. You just get ignored. I think it's an important point to make.
I would, can I on that? I would just say, so the way I've heard the governor's office articulate their position is that they've, I made the point that what they have done is establish a security perimeter for the feds there, and their action starting October 3rd meant that 50 federal guys that prior to October 3rd had been involved in effectively crowd control. Those guys were now free to conduct abductions in the city,
correct,
right, or the suburbs. And the governor's position is maintaining control of the streets was absolutely critical to the National Guard decision. And to their legal position in the case to try to keep the National Guard out of Chicago. And I think I believe it was the activist Kelly Hayes had just a really great response to that. She pointed to that they could have had the option of proving that it was the feds and not the protesters that were responsible for the chaos.
Yeah.
And in particular, she pointed to the protest that was brought on behalf of the protesters and members of the press before Judge Ellis. And Judge Ellis wrote a 233-page decision. And it is the effect of it has been stayed by the Seventh Circuit. But nevertheless, it's an incredible documentation of just from so many of the protesters, from information they got from the government about how many guys so anyway, so all that's to say is another thought that enters my head is our governor is clearly running for president in 2028, and it would hurt his presidential aspirations if there was a lot of chaos between the protesters and the federal government. And I hope it's more of that. What they're saying as far as their legal strategy is just a choice that they've made, and that it's less of a political issue. But I am a little bit suspicious there.
Scott, we're going to be running up against the clock in a minute.
Sure.
I want to, if you can briefly address, in terms of the extent of protests around the city in a broad view. Were you encouraged by turnout, or were you discouraged by the lack of numbers? I'm quite open that I think it was about 10% of the turnout, or maybe 1% of the turnout that was warranted given what was happening. I was disappointed and remain so across the country, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I certainly wish there were more people out there, but someone asked recently, what gave you courage in 2025? And my answer to that was being at Broadview, standing next to people that I didn't know, but recognizing that we were standing together for the same purpose. And while I wish that there were more people there, the numbers did grow. People who didn't protest were out there, right? There was a group of 15 or so Oak Park moms who I helped a little bit when they did a sit-in and were arrested. So to answer your question, yes, I wish there were more people there, but absolutely every person that was there, I found to be incredibly uplifting, and to just have an incredible sense of community with those people, even if I had just met them.
Well, this is going to connect to the subject of the second hour, but it still disappoints me to no end that when masked people with no ID and no warrants are breaking windows and snatching people out of cars and disappearing them, that it's not just people in that community that should be on the streets. People in South Dakota should be on the streets when that's happening in Chicago. People in Chicago should be on the streets when that's happening in North Carolina or Los Angeles. The truths we hold to be self-evident are supposed to apply to all of us, and when they're violated anywhere, it's the right of the people to rise up, but it's also an obligation that goes along with those rights. So, Scott, thank you for all that you have been doing, continue to do, and I know will do. I hope more people join you in that effort, because because we need it if we want to forestall this descent towards fascism that we're well on the way towards. So thank you very much, Scott, for joining us. We have to go to break. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Join Scott Duff and Ellen Miller tomorrow, Sunday at 11 to 1 for their show Out Chicago. They appear every week where they tackle today's headlines from a queer perspective and focus on the accomplishments of the vibrant LGBTQ community in Chicago and across the globe. Out Chicago is Chicago's only live broadcast for the LGBTQ community. Welcome back. I'm Joel Ostrow in for Edwin Eisendrath, and we've been talking about some issues surrounding the immigration enforcement by the federal government. Been focused on the Chicago area. We're going to sort of move that focus away a little bit. I am joined by Juan Garcia, who I've called many things over the years, former student of mine. Juan, I'm going to talk about you for a second and embarrass you a little bit. Juan, well, he stood out in many ways as a student at Benedictine, but and I'm not sure what year you were on campus when you really jumped out to me. But after the first election of Donald Trump, Juan was particularly active, both in response to the Islamophobia and the attacks on Muslims. We have a large Muslim student population at Benedictine University. And then, of course, in protecting the DACA students, and became really a well-known voice on campus and then in the broader community. After graduating, he's one of the handful of students that I have had the pleasure to teach over my 25 plus years now at Benedictine, who has taken the lessons that some of us have tried to instill in our students and take them forward. He has lived the life of trying to make his community, his country a better place and a safer place, and that lives up to the ideals in the Declaration and the Constitution. Most recently, he worked as a Democratic Party organizer in the state of Wisconsin through a couple of election cycles. And after the last election, I'm assuming this started beforehand, started organizing a nonprofit organization called Kalpuli Across Borders. And I want to give Juan a chance to talk about that, and we'll spend the half hour talking about his efforts there. But Juan, thank you so much for the time, and thanks for joining us today. It's good to see you. Even though you can't see me, I can see you on that screen.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the kind words. I can always turn to you and to center me back and humble me when I have some words to write down or jot down on a piece of paper. But it's truly, I'm really grateful that I'm here with you. And truthfully, you're one of the few professors that actually invited me or encouraged me to keep at it, even when things didn't go my way. And I realized really quickly politics and just the organizing aspect of things takes a lot of time. And you showed me that patience. And even in 2015, 2016, we're still fighting the same fight. And so patience is running thin, but we're still here trying to fight.
Yeah, I think people don't really realize that. We have another alum who's trying to set up a nonprofit international. Like, it is a lot of work. It is not easy. It's not just the legal stuff and coming up with the mission and the ideas, but it's organizing people, it's fundraising, it's everything. It takes severe dedication, and admire you for getting as far as you have already with Kalpuli. Can you, I'm going to ask a stupid question, but from all the classes you took with me, I excel in asking really stupid questions. What motivates your activism? Like, can you talk a little? Where does that come from? What drives it?
Yeah, I mean, it's personal lived experiences, and I think this is the reason why I got into organizing and wanted to change things. And it's the direct kind of impact that I had growing up in a mixed status family. But by the grace of God and the fearlessness of my brother, my parents were able to get their residency not too long ago, and so everything has worked out and panned out up to date. But I'm seeing the problems that emerge from living in a home where your parents are undocumented. Also, I grew up in Aurora, and so the high school that I attended, about 85% of the student body is also Latino, Hispanic based, and seeing friends that were documented. Seeing friends that were also affected by the status of immigration really drove me to want to do something about it. And although we're in dark times right now, there's a lot of people that want to be involved and that are in similar situations as me. But ultimately, just trying to find the space for people to overcome, separations of family, or to overcome, just the trauma that we're currently living. It's really inspiring, and I'm finding it easier to find it nowadays. And I'm also finding it easier to know that there's more people like me that want to get involved, and I'm not the only one doing things like this. Just like the speaker beforehand, who's been in Broadview and probably have not been impacted directly, but it's inspiring to see that we have allies, and we also have people that are willing to put their lives on the line to combat ICE ultimately.
Were you? Juan was involved. You were involved in electoral politics campaigns for quite a while. At one point, I believe you were toying with the idea of setting up a consulting firm that would have focused on that. Was your turn towards this Kalpuli initiative? Did that come prior to the November election in 2024, or is this a result of the actions that began with Trump's inauguration?
Truthfully, it was very reactionary, and so this came about post January, after his his inauguration, and so it came in the spring, and the thought process of it came in the spring. The formation came and through the summer, and we got incorporation late fall.
Sounds good. Okay, so tell us. For ignoramuses like myself, what does Kalpuli mean? And then what is Kalpuli across borders? If you can sort of, in a few sentences, tell us what the purpose is, and then we'll get into the weeds.
Yeah, no. Myself, I had to brush up a little bit on my Aztec, on the Nahuatl tongue, because this name came about from one of the founding members, Jesus El Toro, came through with the name, and ultimately I wasn't too tied up with the name. I just know we needed something to exist for this specific cause. But ultimately, Kalpuli means a clan, a neighborhood, a family outside of your immediate family. So community, and being able to build amongst each other, and being able to help amongst each other beyond your immediate family. So and then Kalpuli across borders ultimately signifies and embodies that, in a sense that we try to help with mutual aid and dignity the families that have been affected by deportations. Whether a family loses the breadwinner of a household, we come in and help them, given that we live in the United States of America and bills pile up regardless of what is happening in our lives, regardless of what the status or the traumatic events that are happening within our lives. Rent, mortgage, and electric bills, so on and so forth, keep piling up. And so we created this organization to help families that lose a breadwinner to a deportation, and that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is helping dreamers, documented people that are caught up in this situation, because not only are they targeting, as we've seen, undocumented folks, but they're also targeting anyone that does not look like them or is white, whether they're U.S. citizens, whether they're U.S. residents, or documented people. So we have seen cases where documented people are deported, and these are folks that have never seen their home country. These are folks that do not have families in their home countries or a system to fall back on, because they came at a very young age. And so we try to help in the sense that we provide home assistance, housing assistance, and basic needs as they reintegrate into their home country, or whether they find jobs or they find a way to survive in a country they've never been in before. And so these are the two major aspects that we are working on. And I think you'll be glad to also hear that Sam has been working on something really nice, in finding ways to reunify and create kind of a service type within Calpulli to reunify family and make the move, whether it be with their belongings or their financials, and transferring money from one bank to another back to their home country. And we're exploring this to help families and reduce the cost for people that do want to reunify with their family members in their home country. And there's other aspects to this, but the overall idea is, we try to facilitate and be there as much as we can after a traumatic event such as a deportation.
Well, I know the organization obviously is new. How do you see the split between assistance to, for lack of a better way of putting it, the families left behind versus the assistance to those who have been seized and deported? So
as of right now, we've only been able to help families in the States. Currently, we are finalizing the infrastructure to help people in their respective countries, because we have to partner with consulates, and because truthfully, they are the only ones that get real data as to who's being deported to what country. And so we are in the final stages with the Consulate of Mexico for them to release information and for us to reach out to people directly that are young and have not had the opportunity to reintegrate. Right now it's 100% of family members, but that would change in the beginning quarter of 2026.
And long term, do you look for like a 50-50 split on the focus for the organization, or do you not even think in those terms?
Yeah, we that's thinking like the enemy in quotas. And so, yeah, we're not thinking of those terms. So we're trying to right now focus our efforts to those affected in the Midwest, to try and really build the foundation to extend nationwide. But we don't want to limit ourselves as to where our funds are going to go, in the sense of helping people. So yeah, there is no direct split yet in mind.
Okay, Juan, maybe can you give us obviously not naming names, but can you tell a story or two that might help listeners to really understand on a personal level, like what happens and how, maybe a couple of scenarios where Calpulli has been able to materially assist or substantially assist, I guess is the better way to put it.
Yes. So the most impactful story we currently are able to share, because we got permission from the family and the person being affected, is from a woman in West Chicago. Her husband was deported in late December. And he was working at a meat market, and so right after his shift, he was waiting for his wife to pick him up, and he was waiting under a tree while she arrived, and he was bombarded or cornered by ICE agents asking for his documentation. He was here undocumented, but did not have any warrants or anything that he owed the criminal justice system. And when this happened, she was pregnant. She's pregnant with a baby boy. And so this happened late September. She was about 4 months. I want to say 4 or 5 months. And a week later, or one or 2 weeks later, she was diagnosed with cancer, cervical cancer. And so, she's right now in the process of getting a C-section to remove the baby and incubate the baby while she undergoes chemotherapy. And all while her husband has been deported.
To Mexico, I assume?
Correct, yes, to Mexico. And she also has 2 daughters. And so, she lost her job due to the cancer treatment that she has to get, and her being pregnant. She lost the breadwinner, and so we've been able to step in to pay her electric bill, her rent. And so we did that for November, and we're going to continue doing it for January. And another aspect that I didn't touch on earlier is that we're really trying to get the surround system aid for the people that do need it, and incorporate some financial literacy to families that want to sustain a life in the United States without a breadwinner, and find other resources in which they can get beyond Kalpuyi. But it's hard for stories like this woman's, because for me it's very inspiring in the sense that she keeps going. She is determined to live, and she's determined to carry her family forward. She is documented. She does have her paperwork in line. So after her cancer treatment, she is hoping to go back to Mexico and see her husband again. And they're hoping to fight their case and move forward with this at some point. But Kalpuyi is here for her. Kalpuyi is here for families like her, and that they are going through something.
How do these families? Well, first of all, you got your 501c3 certification. Like, was it in October? It's recent. September, yes, October, somewhere in there? For
the state of Illinois, we were incorporated. Right now, we're being sponsored by a 501c3, and we're waiting on the determination letter from the IRS. Okay. But our paperwork is in line to be. But everything that goes through is being vetted by a 401c3 that's certified. So we're getting sponsorship by them.
I'm just trying to emphasize that this is a new organization. You guys are just ramping up. How many cases have you been able to directly work on support? So you described one family. Do you have data, like how many have you been able to support so far?
So that's an ongoing thing. That has been our only family.
Okay.
In light of transparency, we've raised about $8,000, and so most of our funds have gone through that. And so we are hoping to continue our fundraising efforts, but for 2 months, I want to say 2 whole months, we've been able to raise about $8,000, and so we have we're lining up with different things to be able to help and extend our services. Right now, we're finding it a little bit tough for people to request information, but I believe this is because we don't have enough exposure yet, but we know the need it's very large out there.
How would these families find you?
Yes.
And, if a family finds themselves suddenly their breadwinner is, someone in the family has been taken, and you sort of explained how you might locate those who've been deported. That depends on the consulate, and you'd get the information. That I would assume that would be Kalpuyi, perhaps reaching out to those people. But how would the families here find you guys?
So the way this family found us directly, and I think this is going to be we're currently working with elected officials to allow us to be a social service available for them, because we know that people, when they're in desperation, they search for their elected officials. And so at the local level, state level, and congressional level, we're working and we're meeting with elected officials to allow us to help constituents across Illinois. We're also, the reason why this woman was able to find us was through the West Chicago Police Department and their social service department. And so we're currently working with the West Chicago Department, and we want to expand that to all the suburbs, including, although I don't have the connections with the Chicago Police Department, we're trying to get meetings to actively be part of their social service departments, so it could be more streamlined and they know who to call when people do call in distress. We're also partnering up with organizations, rapid response organizations that are doing the work on the ground, legal organizations that are representing people in detention centers. So all these partnerships are really going to come into fruition in 2026. And so slowly but surely, we'll make sure that people hear from us, and if anyone is hearing us right now and knows a family in distress and needs help, you all can visit us on our website, and we have an intake form there where we're able to help directly families, and that's at Kalpuyi Across Borders. Kalpuyi is spelled Kalpulli. I know it's a little wonky, but we're online.
KalpuliAcrossBorders.com. .com or .org?
.org.
Kalpuli.com, KalpuliAcrossBorders.org. Wanting to ask you to dream for a minute, like when you close your eyes and dream about Kalpuli being what Juan Garcia dreams of, what does it look like?
I hope you're not taking too back on this, but I don't want Kalpuyi to exist.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be here. And so my dream is for it to not be in existence, because that means that our people are not being targeted, our people are not being kidnapped, our people are not in need. But in that same sentence, I want to make sure that I'm transparent and say that I want people to see us as a trusted mutual aid organization where they can come to us, trust us, and understand that we're here to help. So in essence, we don't want to exist. In practice, we want everyone to know about us, so we can work harder to fundraise and make sure that the funds go directly to the people being impacted.
Yeah, well, that's a hell of an answer. Given the likelihood that at least until January of 2029, some form of this current regime is going to remain in place. Maybe more shorter term goals, like do you have a target that you want to reach, whether in terms of resources that you have for Kalpuyi or number of families? Like, do you have have you established targets like that by this date we want to, by this date we want to?
Yes. So by Q3 of this year, or of this upcoming year, we want to hit a benchmark of $100,000 to be able to help approximately 50 families.
Okay.
With the impact level being 200 individuals. And that's a very conservative figure that we have in mind. In terms of how do we get there, we're currently working in Wisconsin, because obviously I do a lot of work there. And for the past 5 years, it's been home, and so I have a lot of connections there that we're able to expand. And Illinois, right? The other two founding members are work for the cities in their respective cities, and so they have a lot of connections as to where we can venture out and we can grow. And so between Wisconsin and Illinois, we want to help and we want to grow as much as we can. The split, I would like for it to be about 25 to 25 families. But obviously right now the need is far much greater. in Illinois because Chicago is being targeted. Chicago and its suburbs are being targeted heavily, given that it's a Democratic city.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin, there's some politics that's being played as to why ICE is not in there. But I can reserve that conversation for a different day.
I'd like to use the last few minutes, if I may. How can people help? Obviously, monetary donations are key. Let me again give this out. KALPULLI across borders. So it'd be all one word, .org. If you'd like to donate, you'll be able to on there and obviously find out more about the organization. Are there other ways that people can help besides financial contributions?
Yes. A big part as to why we felt inspired to do something like this is because, there's a lot of professionals, young professionals that don't have the ability or cannot afford to be out in the forefront and combat ICE at Broadview or combat ICE on the ground. And so the website was completely done by a computer engineer or I think that's what the bachelor's is called, but he's also from BU. He's also Latino, and it was donated to us. The videos that are on our Instagram were also donated by a videographer, and so we have a marketing team who has come in and they're like, we don't know how to help. We can help you with some money, but we want to put our best efforts and our experience forward to make sure that we can help the cause. And lawyers are also reaching out, offering their services. We also have a few people that are willing, through the Chicagoland area, are willing to host families that are going through hardships, or if they lose a home, they're able to host people and offer up a room or two. There's really a diverse way to get it plugged in. If you have a skill, we're able to intake that and make sure that the impact goes farther. Whatever that may be, we want to get to know you. We want to know how you can help us, and we want to input you in the fight.
Can I add one thing to that, Juan?
Yes,
because I've known you for so long. If there are so many social services organizations in the Chicago metro area that serve the Latino community, the Hispanic community, I'm certain that some either involved with those organizations or who have donated or have connections to those organizations are listening. One thing I can tell you about Juan Garcia, this guy's all about networking. So if anyone's thinking, about turf wars, or he's looking to cut into our donor stream, like, that is just not who you are. It's not who you've ever been. I know that Kaupuli's objective would be to work with other social services organizations, whether you work in housing or healthcare or job training or placement. All of these things go together. They're all the sorts of things that the people you're looking to serve have need for. So I encourage anyone listening with an interest or involvement already to reach out and connect at a minimum with Kaupuli, with Juan Garcia and his team. One more time, Juan, it's Kaupuli Across Borders. That's KALPULLI Across Borders, all one word, .org, if you want to learn more or are able to and wish to assist. Juan, it's so great to talk to you. I know we'll talk again real soon. This is hard work you're doing. I can't imagine. It must be exhausting at times, especially when it's something that you really wish you weren't doing. Very much know how that feels. All power to you in the new year, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. We need to go to a break.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for this. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Welcome back. I am Joel Ostrow, Professor of Political Science at Benedictine University. I'm sitting in today for Edwin Eisendrath. And in this second hour, we are going to turn to a really small, insignificant, micro topic that doesn't have too much importance, the Constitution. Just a little background about my experience, and we have two really distinguished, eminent guests who I'm really grateful for joining me today for this conversation. When I was studying Russia, published a book in the mid-2000s about how Russia's attempt to create a democracy failed and how it ended up a new kind of dictatorship. And probably the most significant part of that book was on the Constitution, the process of adopting it, how then President Yeltsin manipulated it individually on his own hand by changing a few lines in the Constitution before it was ratified by the public that essentially rendered that Constitution open to dictatorship. And that experience alerted me to the importance of looking at constitutions comparatively. The University of Chicago has a Center for Comparative Constitutions. I think I got the name right. That was instrumental for me in my understanding how I come to understand most political topics through a comparative lens. Obviously, there are challenges and strains and perhaps even changes happening to our Constitution and how it functions in our country. We are joined now by Jeffrey Stone, the Edward H. Levy Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago, former Dean of the Law School at Chicago. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. We met many years ago at Benedictine when the late Jim Ryan, former Attorney General, created a Center for Civic Leadership, and I believe it was his first of many symposia that he held. It was after the adoption of the Patriot Act, and you joined us and gave an incredible historical context to concerns and actions around First Amendment rights and the Patriot Act and how those First Amendment rights have changed throughout history. So I'm really pleased and grateful to you for joining us, because there's certainly a perception that these rights are again under challenge, perhaps transformation through recent actions by the court and the Trump administration. So first of all, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Joel. It's great to see you again.
So maybe you could just give a real general, how do you read the current situation regarding the court, this administration around those fundamental rights? How do you put it into context? We can take the conversation from there.
Well, first of all, in terms of this administration, I think it's fair to say that Trump has really no regard for our fundamental constitutional rights. He believes that he has essentially unlimited power and regards the limitations on those powers as unwarranted and unjustified. And he is prepared to put in place policies and try to implement laws that disregard the fundamental principles and rights of the American people. This poses a really unprecedented challenge to American democracy and American constitutional law. And it is essential that Americans and that members of Congress and that the judiciary stand up to this to prevent it from having a truly devastating effect on our nation and on our democracy.
In response to that, is it not this Supreme Court that, in fact, conferred upon the presidency? The media so often says it gave to Trump, and I just hate that. The court has given nothing to Trump. It's given to the presidency that unlimited power by essentially putting presidents above the law, saying they can't be prosecuted. Is that a misreading of that?
I think it's fair to say that this Supreme Court has immunized President Trump and presumably future presidents from all sorts of responsibilities, and also given him a greater degree of authority to regulate American law and policy. One example of that is the idea of the unitary executive. A key question in American law for over a century now has been whether it is possible for Congress to enact laws that create agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Reserve, that have commissioners that are independent of the president, that they have terms of office and cannot be removed by the president except for a showing of real cause. And the reason for that is the idea of making these non-political entities. The idea is to have the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and so on, act in favor of American policies, not in support of what any particular political party or particular president wants. And the Supreme Court in 1935, in Humphrey's Executor, unanimously held that that was constitutional, that Congress could create these agencies with commissioners who are appointed to serve a specific number of years and to be bipartisan in order to achieve the goals of these agencies. But the Trump administration has very strongly attempted to undermine that, and the Supreme Court has indicated, at least, that it may well be willing to do that. It has agreed to hear a case for the current term called Trump versus Slaughter, involving the Federal Trade Commission, in which Trump claims that the members of the Federal Trade Commission who are appointed as independent commissioners can be removed by him at will. And he's been trying to do this, as we know, across all sorts of agencies.
Across all of them, yeah. Yeah,
and there have been lots of lawsuits about this, but now it's finally come directly to the Supreme Court. Up until now, the Supreme Court, until very recently, has supported Humphrey's executor, but in the last year or two, the Roberts Court has indicated a willingness to rethink that and perhaps overrule that. And that would have a devastating effect on the ability of these agencies to act in a neutral, non-political fashion, which is what they were intended to do.
I'd like to turn this back to the First Amendment. I know that, but at least in my experience with you, that's your passion. What's the greatest threat to those rights that you see, or where is that threat coming from? I mean, obviously there's President Trump and his lack of respect for it, but beyond him, like maybe in the context of the court, or where do you see the greatest threat coming to freedom of press, speech, assembly, those basic rights?
First of all, it's obvious that the Trump administration has taken an extremely aggressive anti-free speech approach to universities, to law firms, and to other entities, essentially withdrawing federal funds from them unless they agree to do what Trump wants them to do. No one would have ever imagined this to be constitutional until the present time. But this is what the Trump administration is doing with institutions like Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, and so on.
Northwestern.
Northwestern, exactly. And it's very challenging for universities because they don't want to run the risk of losing huge amounts of money during the time that it takes to litigate these issues, because the Trump administration has withdrawn huge funds from these institutions if they don't immediately agree to his demands. And even if they may win the lawsuits over time, it could be 2 or 3 years without those resources. And to do medical research and healthcare and scientific research, which are highly dependent upon federal funding, losing those resources would be devastating.
Yeah.
So Harvard, because it is so rich, has been willing so far to stand up.
Fear is a powerful weapon in the hands of aspiring dictators, that's for sure. That's their main tool.
And the Supreme Court has, on free speech issues, has been, it has not addressed this question yet. It has not had this issue before yet, exactly. But it certainly demonstrated a willingness to interpret the First Amendment and other constitutional provisions in a way that is consistent with conservative politics.
Yeah.
In Free Speech v. Paxton last year, for example,
Yeah.
the court, in a 6-3 decision with all the Republican-appointed justices in the majority, held that Texas could require websites that have sexually explicit materials to verify that anyone who uses the website is an adult and not a child. Now, that might seem a reasonable thing to do. You can't go into a movie theater that shows sexually explicit material without showing that you're an adult, or buy a book in a bookstore. But the Supreme Court had previously held 2 decades ago in the Ashcroft case that the internet is different, because in the internet, once you identify yourself, that information remains there, and it can be used and sold and distributed to others that you've gone to the site, whereas going to a bookstore or going to a movie theater has never had that consequence. And so the chilling effect, the court said, of people willing to go to see material that is constitutionally protected for them would be serious. Thus, what the court said in Ashcroft is that it's up for parents to regulate what their children can do and can't do. But last term, in the Paxton case, the court, in a 6-3 decision, overturned Ashcroft and held that Texas could prohibit websites to make sexually explicit material available unless an individual proves that they are an adult. And again, the problem with that, if you're an adult, is that if you do that on the website, that information that you've accessed that can be then used by the website in all sorts of ways to damage you. And that deters your exercise of your First Amendment rights. Nonetheless, the court now was willing to do that. Another example last term was United States versus Grimetti, a 6-3 decision, again, with all 6 Republican-appointed justices in the majority, in which the court upheld a state law prohibiting certain medical care for transgender minors. This was not a First Amendment issue, but basically held that the law that prohibited healthcare providers from prohibiting puberty blockers for any minor for the purpose of enabling the minor to live with a gender identity different from one at birth was permissible, and that the state can prohibit any doctor from engaging in that medical care. Another example of the court's First Amendment decisions recently is Mahmoud versus Taylor, again a 6-3 decision, in which the court held that parents have a First Amendment right to remove their children from reading any books in schools about LGBTQ people. And the idea that the parents have a First Amendment right to determine what their kids can read or not read in school is unprecedented. And here the court, 6-3, said, well, parents have a right to do that. So these are examples of the court being very activist in terms of achieving conservative political views in the guise of constitutional interpretation.
Can you maybe put into context, and this is related. All these questions are related because it's all about the First Amendment. But obviously, very much in the news of late was CBS's pulling of that segment from 60 Minutes. It is not the first time that CBS has become in the news for being a target, one way or another, of the news, of reporting being a target at CBS. How do you view that specific incident, and can you put it into context for how you see the challenges to the media as a whole, and what that means for us?
For most of the 20th century and the early years of the 21st century, we took for granted the fact that we had a very robust free speech and free press society in which there were many newspapers, magazines, radio stations, TV stations, many of which were very responsible and thoughtful, from which we could get reliable news, and where government could not intervene in terms of pressuring them to adopt certain positions. Two major things have happened to change all that. One of them is the internet, which means that individuals now are much more likely to get their news from websites on the internet, which are not like New York Times or Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, which provide news in a responsible and reasonably balanced manner. And they get totally distorted news, and they don't know it's distorted because that's all they get. And that has a damning effect upon the effectiveness of our democracy.
Pardon me for interrupting, but often from those with ill intention, like a lot of that generated from places like the Kremlin, particularly in the 2016 election. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a problem that we face as a democracy right now, which is that we got used to the idea that people had ready access to reliable news and information, that most Americans got their news and information from those sources, and that now that's changed dramatically. And that is a real threat to how we go forward as a political entity. Will our citizens have the news and information they need to have in order to make wise and thoughtful and knowledgeable decisions? And the other part of it, of course, is the government intervening, as you mentioned, and manipulating itself what these entities can do, as in the CBS situation. So, again, I think one of the challenges we face as a nation is the need to take a deep breath and step back and recognize that we face a very different reality in terms of the ability of citizens to obtain reasonably fair, balanced, and reliable information, which we took for granted for much of our history.
People often see the internet as the guarantor of democracy. I'm often on with Joan Esposito, and she's like, "Oh, we have all this information. We have all this information." When I was studying Russia after the collapse, a friend and colleague of mine, Steve Fish, coined this term, hyperdemocracy. Hyperdemocracy is anti-democratic. My example in Russia was they chose not to make any choices, so they had a president and a vice president and a prime minister. Like, if there was an office that could be named, they would have that, because let's have everything. And they would have first past the post elections and proportional elections. If they could have any kind of election, we're just not going to make choices. We have everything. And they ended up having nothing when it came to democracy in the end. I sort of see the internet as part of that. But then perversely, there's the flip side, Jeff, is there are very few owners. I mean, most of the internet is owned by Meta and Google. And not only have we been talking for years about concentration of media ownership of the traditional media, but now we have the government manipulating the ownership of things like CBS. In a way, the government controls who owns those things, or is certainly trying to seize control. Is not concentration of ownership a fundamental threat to the First Amendment?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that a relatively small number of individuals are wealthy enough to own the major sources of news and information in our country jeopardizes the future of our democracy. So all of these are serious challenges that we need to address in a thoughtful and responsible manner. And in the Trump administration, we're absolutely not doing that.
And with the Roberts Court, we're not. I mean, if such a case were brought before, I don't know how it would even get to the court, challenging somehow the lack of antitrust legislation to break up these media monopolies. What are the odds that this court would hear the case, much less rule in favor of the First Amendment?
Well, I would like to imagine, although I don't know that I can say this with confidence, that in addition to Kagan and the other two liberal justices, that Roberts and Barrett might be willing to be responsible and take some responsible positions. One of the interesting questions is what will happen in Trump v. Slaughter, is whether they'll be willing to do that. Not at all obvious. They have repeatedly demonstrated a willingness to disregard fundamental principles of our Constitution. And overruling Roe v. Wade, for example, overruling the constitutionality of affirmative action. Those were dramatic ideological decisions that overruled prior decisions by relatively moderate to conservative courts, the Berger Court, the Rehnquist Court, by these justices. So the real question here is whether justices like Roberts can take a deep breath and recognize that the future of our democracy is very much now in their hands, and they have to be non-political, non-ideological about it, and look to fundamental principles about which our nation is based. Whether they will do that remains to be seen.
You know, I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion our first encounter regarding the Patriot Act, and I was blown away by the historical context of your presentation, and you've used the word unprecedented several times, and when I hear that from you, that makes me want to push back at the people who work at WCPT who have branded me Dr. Gloom and Doom. When in history have our First Amendment rights faced the next greatest challenge? If this is unprecedented, this is the worst it's been. Like what can we compare it to? What was previously the worst challenge, or the most extreme?
There were two prior moments when we had dramatic limitations on First Amendment rights. One was during World War I,
Yep.
When the Wilson administration adopted legislation, the Espionage Act of 1917, the Sedition Act of 1918, which effectively made it a crime for anybody to criticize the war or the draft, because Wilson did not want there to be any disagreement with him about whether going into the war and fighting the war was a good idea. And the Supreme Court upheld those laws during World War I, and thousands of individuals were prosecuted and given lengthy jail sentences, and it had a devastating effect on the ability of individuals to express their views. Later, the court eventually turned around and recognized those decisions were wrong and overruled them, and held that that type of restriction on speech is basically unconstitutional, except for extraordinary circumstances of clear and present danger of grave harm, a test that's almost impossible to meet. The other time in our history when we faced major restrictions on speech was during the Red Scare, when, again, the Supreme Court in the Dennis case upheld the convictions of all the leaders of the Communist Party, basically because they advocated for the Russian government. And again, that decision was later overruled. But at the time, the court failed to live up to its responsibilities. So we have lived through periods of serious suppression of speech, and we'll see where we go this time.
Colleague of mine, Brian Endless at Loyola, and I have done a podcast called the World Discord Podcast that looks at global issues, and we always end our hour discussion with a stupid question, which I want to present to you. If you had a magic wand and could wave it and achieve some kind of realistic change, right? I kind of imagine, like, you have a better court, replace the 6 people on the court. That's not realistic, but like within the realm of reality, if you had a magic wand and could wave it, what would you see as the most significant fix?
Well, I think one would be for the Democrats to take control of the House and or the Senate, so as to at least reduce the legislation that could take place. And the other would be for the justices on the Supreme Court, particularly Roberts and Barrett and perhaps one or two others, to take a deep breath and recognize that they have a fundamental responsibility to protect the core values of our nation when they are in jeopardy, as they are today, and to stand up to that. And they have cases before them, and it will be coming before them in the next few years, in which they could make a real difference. So that I don't think that's impossible. So I hope very much that it occurs.
Well, from your lips to their ears, Professor Jeffrey Stone, Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago, former Dean of the Law School. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. We have to go to a break. It's been great talking to you again. Happy holidays. Happy New Year to you. My pleasure. Same to you. It's a pleasure. Take care.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Hi, I'm Joel Ostrow, and yes, we are here talking about our stupid democracy. Continuing with our discussion of the Constitution, or what's left of it. We're joined now by another eminent scholar of the U.S. Of the Constitution, of constitutional law. Peter Shane is the Jacob E. Davis Chair in Law Emeritus at The Ohio State University and Distinguished Scholar in Residence at NYU School of Law. Professor Shane, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be with you.
I'm going to ask, in light of the discussion we just had with Jeffrey Stone, do we still have a democracy in the United States of America?
Democracy, as undoubtedly your exploration has revealed, is a remarkably kind of plastic term. Lots of different systems kind of fall within that umbrella. The question, I think, is not, are we a democracy, but what kind of democracy are we? And at the moment, we are, I would say, a fragile democracy. We are, there are still elements of electoral accountability, particularly at the state and local level, that seem to work. And, free speech has not been shut down. There's still rights of free assembly and petitions, so forth. So things are not lost, but we are not the kind of strong democracy that we would have the resources to be if we had the political will to be that.
I ask that because, Jeff, in the last half hour, talked about infringements on First Amendment rights, including freedom of speech. My first guest today, Scott Sakiyama, we were talking about immigration enforcement, and at least here in Chicago, there have been significant infringements on freedom of assembly and of demonstration of protest, right to protest. When I teach on this subject at Benedictine, I refer to that Supreme Court decision that put presidents above the law as meaning we no longer have the rule of law, because when there's the rule of law, by definition, nobody is above the law. So my question was motivated really by those realities. Obviously, you have concerns. I'm aware of that. So maybe I should change it to this. What do you see as the status of our Constitution right now? What's working, what's not?
Well, to a remarkable extent, the lower courts are working.
Yeah.
In terms of the federal judiciary, I think so much publicity is given to what's going on in the Supreme Court that it's overlooked that there have been, we have over 400 cases filed against the Trump administration. Judges in at least 37 states have found against the administration on a variety of issues. Those include judges appointed by Republican presidents, sometimes judges appointed by Donald Trump himself. And I think a lot of judges are trying to do as conscientious a job as is humanly possible, faced with often kind of unprecedented challenges. Having said that, I guess maybe one difference between my formulation and yours is that I kind of resist the off-on switch to, do we have a constitution? Do we have a democracy? Mm-hmm. We have a constitution that is, in significant respects, under assault.
Yeah.
In significant respects, its structure is not well suited to the kinds of democracy that we want to be and the kinds of challenges that we face. But it is not as if the courts are unimportant as kind of venues for resistance in the assertions of rights. And I don't think we should underestimate the tools that we have at our disposal.
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Steve Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. Their first award-winning book was How Democracies Die. I think a part of their inspiration for some of their formulations came from someone who I read years ago as an undergraduate, Jane Mansbridge, about participatory democracy. In the end, the Constitution's words on paper, or ones and zeros on a screen, judges can issue interpretations, rulings, and orders. But in the end, does not our system depend on the people performing according to what those guidelines are? In other words, courts, there can be laws and court orders, as we have seen in Chicago, but when law enforcement does not enforce those orders, then the courts are, no matter what they're deciding, it seems to me, are quite weak. How do you see all of that and put that in perspective?
I agree with you fundamentally that the role of the people, as you put it, is absolutely central to the strength of democracy. So the way the law evolves clearly reflects social movements, not always immediately, not always as fully as we might prefer. But if you look at what happened in the Supreme Court before the way the court had moved during the Warren Court, the Berger Court, even in the Rehnquist Court, you could see the movement. Yeah. You could see the impact of the labor movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, the consumer movement. Having people engage in giving meaning to the Constitution through the way they act, not just individually but collectively, is of central importance. And again, this is, and I think that what the Constitution means in effect over the next 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years is going to depend a lot on whether, for example, the kind of no kings reaction to the Trump administration evolves into something kind of more organized. Yeah. Whether you see people sort of defending what are kind of traditional venues for kind of collective dialogue across all kinds of party and tribal lines. I think one of the unfortunate sort of facts of life that we now face is that the right has been very alert to where dissent and conversation and democratic action can occur. It's not an accident that they're attacking universities. Yeah. They're also attacking public libraries.
And law firms.
and law firms. Mm-hmm. But, not everybody has access to a law firm.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody has access to a library.
Yeah.
And if you crack down on the librarians' ability to respond to people's curiosity, to facilitate conversations and debates among them, to provide them information in a kind of safe space for all kinds of democratic dialogue, that's a very dangerous thing. And the right wing knows it. Yeah. The question is whether progressives are going to act to defend it.
Yeah, it does depend on the people, right? I mean, it's the tactic of fascists and aspiring dictators throughout history. You go after the quote unquote, the voices of the people, right? Universities, media, lawyers, libraries, those that can lead in the provision of information and contesting information that's coming from leaders for accountability and transparency. I want to ask you, given your expertise in the court, on the Constitution and the court, what are the biggest cases pending before the court in the next session or a couple sessions, like what that concern you the most?
Well, I'm very concerned, although I guess I share in people's fatalism about a case called Trump versus Slaughter, which is I've written about this now for the Atlantic, Washington Monthly, and so forth, where the court really has been on a following a program since at least 2013 of trying to reinterpret Article 2 of the Constitution in a way that enables what has come to be called this unitary executive theory. And this is really, and unitary executive theory comes in a lot of forms, but all of them accept as a premise that presidents are somehow constitutionally guaranteed the right to fire the heads of all federal agencies at will. This was a marginal view half a century ago. 90 years ago, the Supreme Court unanimously rejected that idea in upholding the structure of the Federal Trade Commission. But since the Reagan administration, this has become a kind of target of the conservative legal movement. And I don't. And I guess I want to be clear here. I don't think that in the mind of everybody advancing this theory, they are necessarily connecting, I want this theory because it will help move the country in a right-wing direction. But I do think one of the reasons its appeal took off with the Reagan administration is because without the invention of some, and I'm using the word invention advisedly, without creating some meaning for the Constitution that gives the presidents power that is not accountable to Congress and the courts, then right-wing presidents, conservative presidents who want to undermine the regulatory state in particular wouldn't have the authority to do it. And Congress doesn't pass statutes that say the president hereby has authority to disassemble the national government as appropriate. That's not the way legislation is written. So you have presidents, again, trying to exercise power through agencies, and nothing would make it easier to do that with regard to the full scope of the executive establishment than the president's ability to fire people at will, especially when the Congress and the Senate in particular is just supine and kind of sitting on its hands when it comes to really vetting appointees for genuine qualifications.
Right. Yeah. And it seems to me that that case, I see the beginning of the court's damage to our system is perhaps being with Citizens United, which really, to my eyes, fused money and politics, money in electoral politics and money in government in to levels that had not been seen before in a long time in this country, if ever. And if this decision goes for the administration, and I agree with you, I see that it will, a friend of mine messaged me before saying that the moneyed class is done with letting elected representatives of their lowest paid employees place limits on their own behavior or to tax them. And it seems like this case might be the culmination of that descent into plutocracy or kleptocracy here. And
I think to sort of go back to your point about the relevance of the people and really the relevance of politics. We focus on since I teach law for a living, obviously I'm focusing on what the courts do. But what has enabled or facilitated or given rise to the kind of legal developments that we've seen over the last 25, 30 years is as much a result of legislative decisions to deregulate banking, decisions that have enabled the amassing of, limitless fortunes, really.
It really is limitless, right? Yeah.
I think when you have a single human being who has command over, the kind of budget that would have pretty much been the federal budget of 1789, but the single individual is not divided into three branches checking and balancing one another.
Right.
They're not responsible to the electorate in any way. You do have a very dangerous situation, and I have to say, one of the again great misfortunes of politics, but I always say this, is that inertia favors the bad guys.
Yep.
Which is to say that if people are not, if people don't care, and there are lots of reasons why just the pressures of everyday life and the need not to follow politics with every second of one's life, these things are going to divert people's attention. But the people who have billions of dollars to defend, they're paying attention, and if there are no speed bumps put in their way, you will see a continued erosion of the realm of domestic life, and I don't mean home life, I mean domestic within the United States life, that people will be able to control through elected representatives.
And when people like them are taxed at 1% and people like me are taxed at 30%, and we have a deficit, their response is cut spending, right? Not tax them. And so things become worse and worse, and then the average person is so focused on paying their most basic bills that going to the streets to try to change things becomes more and more difficult. Do you think, Peter, that we've reached a when in the course of human events moment? I'm you had the family optimist on the phone, so I guess I would say put somebody else on. You're talking to Dr. Gloom and Doom, apparently. That's what the people here call me.
Yeah. So no, I don't think we are there, but I do think we need to evolve, new local institutions that protect really, what economists would call public goods.
Yeah.
And among the public goods are information, reporting, the ability, education, basically the people of the ability of communities to, again, gather, form, a kind of collective judgment as to the direction of their community, and hold their elected officials accountable to make sure that happens. We have all of the technologies, and many of the technologies that are now being used to suppress dissent don't have to be that way. We have the capacity for dialogue online. You could have public hearings when people, even the person who has to stay home and take care of their child, or somebody who's disabled, they could participate in the hearing.
Good.
But you have to insist on it. You have to insist that there be opportunities for voices to be heard.
It seems to me, though, it sort of gets back to what we were talking about before. This extremist deregulation has allowed this incredible concentration, not just of wealth, but of corporate power, right? What are there, 5 media owners? Now it's about to be 4. Even on the internet, if you consider the power of Meta and Google, and I guess X, although I hate to even say that, right? That the ability to control information is so extreme that I think it makes the exercise of First Amendment rights difficult, certainly puts them at grave risk. And I wonder, I see the return of Trump to power, right? A 30-plus times convicted felon to power, someone who fomented an attack on the Capitol to try to carry out a coup to remain in power when he had lost a democratic election. I see that as evidence that the structures in the Constitution that worked for so long no longer meet the needs of this society, this technology, our civilization today. And Pete Buttigieg recently articulated a similar idea that when we get through this, there's going to have to be changes made to how we do things in our system. And I wonder, A, if you agree with that, and B, like, if you do, could you name a few of the major, most significant changes that you see would help to restore, the realization of the truths we're supposed to hold to be self-evident?
Yeah. So, it's the holiday season, so I can wish for gifts, right?
Yeah.
Right. so in that spirit, I do think in terms of, let me just say one thing that could be done straightforwardly under existing procedures without, any kind of, extra cute manipulation of the system, is you could get in every state a movement to award the state's electoral votes for president only to somebody who actually wins 51% of the vote in that state. Now, that might mean that the states will have to have runoffs or, use ranked choice voting or something. But Hillary Clinton would have been president in 2016. Al Gore would have been president in 2000. If we had that kind of situation, but instead you had, the entirety of a state's electoral votes going to somebody who won just barely, if at all, a plurality vote. So that's something easy. In terms of amending the Constitution, a thing, over a decade ago, I published my draft of a pro-democracy constitutional amendment. And you may have noticed that this did not cause a popular movement. But it's possible to amend the Constitution to make voting a federal right, to provide federal protection against gerrymandering to ensure actually competitive elections, which would certainly help undermine a too complacent political establishment. It would authorize, public funding for elections. It would authorize controls on the amount of money that can be spent on elections. Again, all of that could be done to replace, the Supreme Court's less helpful decisions with a different set of constitutional rules.
Maybe a federal paid holiday, or move the elections to a Saturday. And even then, I think it would still have to be a lot of people work on Saturday, so I think it needs to be a federal paid holiday.
I'm all for that, but I think protecting the integrity of mail-in voting is just essential. Oh yeah. So.
You can do both.
I don't want to say. It's not necessarily universally true that if the current president opposes something, it's a good thing to have. But certainly, it's the case with mail-in voting. I think a big test for the court. You asked before about major cases in the coming term. Obviously, a very big one is going to be about birthright citizenship. Yeah. And I do think. I think Trump's going to lose.
Do you?
I do think that. And I think he's going to lose. Well, I think the law is, entirely against his position.
Oh, yeah.
Putting aside, what the Constitution means, although that's, I think, incontrovertible, Congress by statute has implemented Section 1 of the 14th Amendment by calling for birthright citizenship. So it's a statutory right as well as a constitutional right. It would take legal reasoning as bad as Dred Scott for Trump to win. Now, and what I want to say about that is I think he's going to lose, and I think the court is, I think the justices in their, heart of hearts or whatever, think that this is a way of showing that they're not just kind of in the tank for this administration. If I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, you beat me to the question. Yeah.
If I am wrong about that, and again, I try not to be an alarmist, but I would just say I think that's the end of the Supreme Court. I don't think that there's. I think the movement for changing the court structure and authority would just be overwhelming. It would be as bad an opinion as Dred Scott.
Huh. You have more optimism in the... I didn't think you were going to go in that direction. I mean, I think it would be the end of the Supreme Court because it would render itself irrelevant, but I think it would be the consolidation of dictatorship in the United States of America.
I really think that people would not stand for it. And the other thing to be said, and you know, the Constitution does have a mechanism for amendment.
Yep.
We've come very close to having a sort of right-wing call for a convention to require a balanced budget and so forth. But I think would be an incredibly important piece of legislation because we don't have this in place now. We don't have any set of rules for what a convention would be. And I think that's a lot of people who agree profoundly with the need for constitutional change are worried about a convention because they have no idea what it would entail, and they know what kinds of resources the right has to organize in terms of money, and it's not irrational to be frightened. I think if we could have a set of rules about, the way in which the members of the convention would be chosen, how votes would be taken, the whole gamut, that we could have, a convention that would truly be an expression of authentic democracy, and not just a kind of, factional cabal.
The reason, the paradox, obviously, of that is if we had such consensus on rules, on norms, on participation, on those sorts of things, then you wouldn't need the convention that you're talking about. And I don't see how you get that convention given the fundamental splits that we see. Whether that's people who are acting in their own self-interest or have been deceived to think that things that are against their interests are for them. But I'm encouraged by your optimism. We can hope that the court behaves responsibly or as sort of sees the light, as it were. We have to go to break. Professor Shane, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight talking to you, and hope we get the chance to do so again, perhaps at greater length. Thank you so much. And Happy New Year to you.
You're very welcome. Happy New Year to you as well.
We'll be back soon.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
We are back. I am Joel Ostrow, and sitting in for Edwin today. And we now will turn the discussion for the last hour to Ukraine. You may have heard that President Zelensky of Ukraine is making the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump to discuss the latest peace proposal. I'll just say that if you think that anything about this is going to lead to peace, I want what you're smoking. If you think it is going to lead to a ceasefire, you're not paying attention. Really what this is about is the radical turn of the United States away from Ukraine to supporting Russia. President Zelensky is offering concessions that he knows Russia will not accept, and hoping that the rejection might convince the regime here in the United States to change its mind and turn back to supporting Ukraine, or at least hopefully not supporting Russia. It's gone unreported here in this country, which sort of harkens back to the conversation in the last hour about matters of government control over the media and censorship. But quite quietly, the Trump administration has lifted sanctions on U.S. companies selling arms and weapons components to Russia. This was reported in European media outlets last week. We will see what that leads to. It does not sound like it will lead to anything good. We are joined this hour by the recently minted Sergeant Rima Ziuraitas. She is a Chicago area native who went to Ukraine shortly after the invasion, the all-out invasion by Russia in 2022. She is a certified TACMED instructor, meaning she instructs Army medics in Ukraine. She has been there saving lives every day for the last several years. Rima, it is a delight to have you. She is joining us from somewhere in Ukraine, which is all you need to know. She won't tell me exactly where because she can't. But Rima, welcome.
Hey, Joel, it's great to be back on again and talking with you. It's great. Merry Christmas, by the way. Very belated Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a Happy New Year. Rima, for those who have not heard you before, can you briefly sketch out your path since the all-out invasion began, the what and the why? Because precious few have gone to the lengths that you have gone in your support of Ukraine. So maybe sketch out your path a little bit for us.
Sure thing. So for me, it didn't start in 2022. It actually started in 2014. So when Russia invaded Crimea, that was kind of the catalyst for me because I am Lithuanian by ethnic descent. And so I live in Chicago where we have a lot of Eastern Europeans, including a huge Lithuanian and Ukrainian community. So when that happened, both communities kind of got together to lobby Washington. We made the pilgrimage out to D.C. to try to talk to congressional officials about like why this is a problem and why, you know, this particular act of Russian aggression is only the first step, et cetera, and so forth. So then fast forward to 2022 and the full-scale invasion, I started on the humanitarian aid side, and I was just packing a lot of humanitarian aid for the first 3 months, and then got the opportunity to work for a nonprofit, Blue Yellow USA, which is based in Chicago. And we were going back and forth to Ukraine to bring non-lethal military aid and medical supplies. And at some point, I had felt that I would be in better service to the people and also soldiers by becoming a medic. And so I did all the training in country and then became a certified instructor on top of that. I was recruited into the Foreign Legion and have been serving for nearly a year in my role as a stabilization point medic and tactical medical instructor. So that's the Cliff Notes version.
That's the Cliff. And this ascent, is that the right word, to sergeant? How did that come about?
It's a recommendation that's made. And so I've passed the entrance exam, and now I still have sergeant's duties and one more course before I get my stripes. But, you know, we're close enough, I guess. But that's a recommendation that's made by higher level command. So that's how that happened.
Which is tremendous. Congratulations on that. Although I think it goes without saying that I and everyone listening wishes you didn't need to do any of that. Can you maybe update us a little bit on the current situation at the front, how things have changed over the last year or so for Ukraine and those fighting on behalf of Ukraine?
Yes, of course. Obviously, we're kind of feeling the squeeze right now with aid kind of being severely curtailed from many places. And that's, you know, it's just part of the thing. And Russia is relentless. So it just keeps coming with more guys, more drones, more ruthless every time. In my particular part of the front line, the drone situation is so bad that medical evacuation is pretty much impossible right now. We have guys sitting on the zero with serious injuries that can't be evac'd out and have been waiting for weeks, like almost like a month for evacuation. And so what we're down to, because I work at the stabilization point, so we have infantry medics that are on the line from other squadrons, not just mine. And it resorts to telemedicine because they have to basically phone a friend in order to make sure they're treating these casualties properly, because it's now turned into a prolonged field care situation.
Good God.
And Yeah. And so this is something that I do for other medics, and also just because, they need to know that someone else is on the other line that can help them, and supplies need to be drone dropped in. And that is a huge problem.
That was my next question. I'm interrupting because, and you'll see why, and hopefully you'll thank me. Is it possible to get supplies, medical supplies, to you or to where they're needed right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, it's a simple situation because I work in a stabilization point that's further out from the zero line. But for them, it has to be by drone. So currently, we are doing okay in terms of getting them supplies by drone.
Okay, but I want to correct that before we go on, because I know listening to the radio or streaming, people can drop in and out all the time, Rima, and I'm going to repeat this a lot. So what Rima just said is that it's possible to get things, but there's a catastrophic shortage of supplies. And as Rima, I'll get to this, there are improper or useless or even harmful supplies that are often sent. You can contribute really in any amount. There's a whole range of things from bandages to tourniquets to other kinds of equipment that are desperately needed at the front. There is a wish list through Amazon where supplies can get to the stabilization points where RIM is at and can get to the people who need it. The website is tinyurl, T-I-N-Y, the word tinyurl.com/medic-wishlist. tinyurl.com/medic-wishlist if you wish to help. Rim, I'm going to do that several times while we're talking. Can you talk a little bit, and we did the last time, but some time has passed, how is morale among the soldiers at the front? I know there was reporting that things had gone more positive a little bit after the European expression of support when the U.S. sort of dramatically turned away. How is that going now?
I think at this point, every time, how do I say this in a polite way? The blustering or blowharding starts from the White House. We just ignore it. Because we know nothing positive is coming, and it's empty threats or empty words. And so a lot of it it's hard to say how it doesn't affect morale anymore because we know it's not a source of morale. And so there are other factors that affect morale more than what happens from the White House. It's more that we have, this, let me give an example from a personal side. So our rotation has been very difficult and we've lost a lot from our unit.
So sorry.
And even some of my own friends. So it's been very difficult for us. And that is more what's harmful to morale right now than what's going on, because what happens in the White House is causing us frustration, but it's something we don't have control over.
Yeah.
Right. So in my particular microcosm, my tiny side of the 1,000 kilometers of the front line, it's more what's going on right in front of us that affects our morale more than what's going on thousands of miles away. And it's trying to keep a positive outlook in general when things like that happen, and when things go really wrong, and they really went very wrong this time.
Sorry.
It's been a giant difficulty for us. And for me personally, every day I have to tell myself, your friend died fighting what he believed in. And it would be a disservice to quit, stop, complain, or cry, because it would not be what he would do. And he would say, I want you to move forward. And so that's kind of the way that I deal with it, is one foot in front of the other, because forward is the only way. And people depend on me and others to keep going as well. And so that's kind of where we keep going. What is our motivator? How we deal with our grief is to put it into work. And also by celebrating the small things, like getting to celebrate Christmas for the first time in a long time. that kind of stuff, because my friend doesn't get to. He doesn't get another Christmas with his family, So really, morale is rooted in the small wins. It's in the way we take care of each other and celebrating those things, as opposed to trying to get the big wins that we know are unattainable. Anything that's within our control is how we go for that.
Can you, I didn't really get to this. We took that turn. I know you only see what Rima Ziuraitas' eyes can see where you're at. Do you notice, do you feel territorial changes at the front?
Sure.
Is it fluid? Is it all one direction in the wrong direction? Does it go back and forth? Like what? I think when I was asking before what the current situation is without realizing it, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, so that it depends on all areas of the front. Obviously, we know that Pokrovsk is probably not going to stay in our possession. That's just based on everything we're seeing. We are losing some ground. There's you can see that on the battle maps. That's Deep State map will show you. It's unfortunate because, we don't have enough resources, right?
Yep.
So like we allocate all of our resources to try and save other parts of the front, and that leaves gaps in other spots where there might need to be reinforcement. And it's because we're so dependent on the outside world for resources when we don't have it, that's kind of why we end up losing ground as well. So it's one of those things where it's like hard to say, but we are losing some ground. So it's a difficult time for us right now.
How frequently do you, your unit, wherever you are, have to sort of pack up and move?
We don't have to do it very often. Okay. The lines do change, but so far it's not such a drastic change that we've had to pick up and move per se. It's more rooted in if the lines change drastically, but our stab point is far enough out where we don't have to do that right now. Could that change in 3 months? Absolutely. From the time I started my rotation in the spring to now, where in the spring we could walk around outside freely, we cannot do that anymore because FPVs can reach our stabilization point, and now we have FPV netting.
Drones,
so
we're talking about.
Yeah, drones. Yeah, absolutely.
How frequent do you hear them, see them in a day?
For us at the stab, it's not as frequent because they're not coming that far out frequently. But it's been at least a couple of times per week, which was a very large uptick from never. Is more or less where I'm at with that one. So it's just kind of dealing with that particular shock of, hey, we can't actually go outside anymore during the day because it's not safe anymore. And that kind of harkens to what happens in Kherson, where they play human safari with civilians. So we know that our directive is, outside of short walks to like maybe the small market, we can't really walk too much outside too frequently.
That's definitely a change from the last time we spoke.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think given news reports, which are fewer and far between here, you have to look now for news about what's happening in Ukraine. In terms of the war, anyway, everything's just Trump over here. It's nauseating. But the attacks on Kyiv yesterday did crack through the news barrier in some way. Can you tell us what, if anything, you know about the results of those, and either in any definition of that word, results, I guess?
You broke up a little bit. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I didn't get the whole question.
I'm talking about the attacks, the recent attacks over the last 24 hours on Kyiv.
Yes.
And what the outcomes of that may have been that we might not have heard about here.
It was pretty bad. A lot of residential buildings were hit, and they flew low this time. Normally, they hit the tops of the buildings. This time, they hit the lower halves of buildings on purpose. They hit a bus stop. An elder care home was hit. So these poor elderly people had to be dragged out into the cold. And it is very cold right now in Ukraine. These are all civilian targets.
Yep.
It was targeted attacks that were all over Kyiv. And to be honest, they sent 500 drones and 40 Shaheds, if I'm not mistaken, to all over Ukraine. But the concentration was Kyiv. So the idea is to wreak havoc on the civilian people. Like the tactic here is that Russia is trying to break the people of Ukraine mentally. And so let's do this over the holiday season, right?
Yeah.
Where we can make people feel like, they will break them somehow. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And the thing is, people are very resilient, and especially Ukrainians. Ukrainians are extremely resilient. And you will find that 9 times out of 10 after an attack like this, which knocked out the power, by the way, for a long time, because they hit a power grid as well. So it's not just that they're targeting civilian infrastructure. They're also continuing to target the power grid. So people are without power and they're without heat.
Well, that is civilian infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in general, what you'll see is restaurants are open, shops are open, generators are humming all over the streets, and people are still getting together. They're going outside. They're having a coffee. They're going to a restaurant because it's an act of defiance to live in spite of the fact that someone's trying to kill you 24/7. It's probably one of the cooler things in general, but the attack was very serious. It was, I believe, 6 or 7 districts that were hit, and the attacks went on not just overnight. So it started at 3 a.m. and ended, I think, somewhere around 10 o'clock. And then another UAV showed up in the afternoon.
Wow.
So it's like ongoing mental torture. And it's just what Russian tactics are. This is not new, unfortunately.
And for people who may be less familiar about this, every single one of those launches of drones, of missiles at civilian targets, each one is its own war crime.
Yes.
So Russia is responsible for literally thousands of war crimes daily in Ukraine, for whatever that's worth. Can you maybe give us, and I promise we're going to spend the second half hour talking about the needs, the things you need, the things you don't need. But before we get to that, and before we have to take a short break, maybe you could talk a little bit about, maybe give us 2 or 3 of your greatest triumphs, like the things that have really brought you satisfaction, or, I don't know, the feel goods.
Oh, there's a lot.
You can give us a few. We got time.
So I'm also a little bit sick, so I apologize if I cough, but the minute I get like any kind of downtime, my body goes, right, illness.
Yeah, I bet.
The wins are in being able to be there for the soldiers that I've trained in basic training who went straight to the front line after they got medical training. And if they end up in my stab, they all recognize me and they're like, we're so glad that you're here. And it's a comfort to them to have someone who can communicate with them and tell them, hey, everything's a little bit messed up right now, but we're going to take care of you. And we're going to do our best to help you. And it's, for me, that's a huge win every time to be able to like be there for them. That's a big deal. And a lot of my wins are grounded in that. Like outside of my role as a medic, I do a lot also for making sure that our squadron, our guys on the line have enough food, that they have, the medics have what they need in terms of medication. I spent Christmas off shift gathering treats and other things for them. And so they know that they're cared about.
Yeah.
Like that's a big deal for me. And they know that like they might be spending Christmas in what equates to hell on earth, but that we are there for them even if they can't see us. Other wins always revolve around saving a life. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest win, is always being able to save a life. Or at least make sure that they have the best quality of life possible despite some pretty catastrophic injuries. I think on a very personal note, when my friend died on his mission, I was able to be there for my other very close friend who woke up from surgery almost immediately after, and I didn't want him to wake up alone. And it was, to be able to be there for him was a big win for me. It's hard to, it's funny because I don't think about those things a lot.
I know.
But when you ask me, it's like, this is kind of where the wins are for me. It's all rooted in being there for my guys and for my friends. It's like, those are the biggest wins, or being able to say yes to a unit that desperately needs tourniquets. Like whenever, like, and I know this is coming up in the second half, but like whenever people like buy from the wish list, or I get a bunch of the supplies that come in, and like I can actually message other, it's a huge win. I can message other medics and be like, I have what you need. I will send it to you tomorrow, and be able to like hear or see the relief in their messages or their voice notes. That's a win. That is a big win for me. Like
tiny URL, tinyurl.com/medic-wishlist. Rima, you did, I would add one that I saw, I can't remember when, but one of your social media posts about someone who you had trained who saved someone at the front who had been wounded, or patched him up, and thanked you for training him, or maybe you ran into him and he told you the story. It was something like that. That must also be tremendously rewarding. You can follow Rima on social media, I believe, and what she's experiencing. Do you want to share your Instagram? You have a public one, right?
Yes. So it's Rima Med UA is the handle. And I have the same handle for Twitter as well. My Twitter is more of the small bite stuff, and my Instagram revolves around TCCC education for tactical medicine, but also personal anecdotes as well from patients. So that's what my social media entails. And you're absolutely right, Joel. The funny part is I don't think about that stuff a lot, because it's like, it's part of my job. It's like an extension of who I am as a human being. So like, I don't think of, and my friend, actually, it's very funny because one of my very good friends was like, I don't think you realize the impact that you have.
I tell you that all the time, do I not? Yeah. Tell me again, Rima, the social media, Rima UA, is it?
Rima Med UA.
Rima Med UA, all one word, or is there a hyphen in there?
All one word.
Rima Med is RIMA Med UA. Cool.
Yeah.
We have to take a break. We'll come back, Rima, and talk about the actual things that are good and bad that you guys receive, and the impact it has. We'll be back after a short break.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
I'm Joel Ostrow, back here with Rima Ziuraitas from somewhere near the Ukrainian front. Rima, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the situation with supplies in general, not just where you are, but the medical supply situation. I want to preface that. Obviously, what Ukraine most needs is weapons and air defense, but neither I nor the people listening here can provide that. But can you talk about what the situation is with supplies on the medical side that people can help with?
Absolutely. So a lot of we had a figure thrown out there a few years ago, and I think it still reigns true today, but that the medical core of Ukraine's military is dependent for 90% of its medical supplies from the outside world. So that is where the bar is. And we basically need everything. And in general, this can be anything from ultrasound machines to blood fridges to tourniquets to fluid warmers, like the whole 9 yards. So of course we have the capabilities of people that work in hospitals. We have the capabilities of people that work in medical supply. And then we have most people that sit at home and go, I have an Amazon account. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you, the Amazon account is really useful because we can get tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, regular gauze, pressure bandages, because a lot of this for military medics like me and others, it boils down to the basics, which is stopping the bleed. Yeah. And we're always running out of tourniquets. We never have enough. The gap is huge. I just had a request for 30 tourniquets literally 15 minutes ago. And as we know, those things are about $30 a piece, for cat tourniquets, because let me tell you right now, Chinese tourniquets don't fly. And we have had enough of people sending us the 3-pack of $12 tourniquets that are actually just a death sentence in a package. And I do feel very strongly about that because, no, you cannot Walmart your way out of this one. It doesn't work that way. And in this particular case, buying cheap is just, you're not helping by sending in triple of one item that's going to cost the life of 3 people. Right. It's not reliable. Those tourniquets, they snap, they break. The part that is most important is that plastic rod. And when that snaps, the belt of it is pretty much useless. It'll do some for stopping the bleed, but that's not the mechanism that tightens the whole thing. It's that rod. And when the rod snaps, you basically just have, it's why we tell you not to use a belt to stop the bleeding. It doesn't work either. It's not that's not the thing that stops the bleeding. So we ask people to dig a little deeper and maybe send a few less tourniquets, but at least we have maybe 1 or 5 or 10 are better than nothing. And that's the problem with even with the Amazon wish list. When I first went down there and sent a batch to you, you open up an item and then Bezos gives you suggestions for other things, and those need to stress, don't buy the other things, even if they look the same. The items that Rima has put on this wish list are ones we know will work, that can save people's lives. Is that fairly accurate? 100%. And I've had people try to argue this with me on the internet, and I'm like, you are not here. You don't know better. I'm sorry. Because it's not, we've tested it, and it's not, and I don't mean by testing it in the, we took it out and made a field test. It's that's what was given in the beginning of the war, and it failed in the field every time. And that includes rhino rescue. Anything that's literally made in China is going to fail, right down to their hemostatic gauze, which stops the bleeding 5 times faster than regular gauze because it's treated with a very special chemical that occludes blood faster. And chest seals, their chest seals don't stick. That really sucks because the thing is, eventually a chest seal will not stick to the body because everybody's sweating, there's blood, whatever. But if you take it right out of the package and it's going to fall off after 5 minutes, then it's not worth it either, because then you got to get the duct tape out a lot faster than you would for, say, a high-fin chest seal. And that's just the thing that we run into. And like people are like, well, it looks the same. It's not. When people send generic hemostatic gauze that's in this like black packaging that says hemostatic gauze, but there's no other information other than the fact that it's made in China. I've tested it. It doesn't react.
What's it supposed to do? What do you mean it doesn't react?
So things like combat gauze made by Quick Clot or Celox will react to fluid, where it will turn the water, instead of it being clear, it turns it into this opaque color. And I usually use red dyed water, and it becomes opaque. And with this Chinese-made hemostatic gauze, there's literally no reaction, and the gauze doesn't soak up the fluid, which is a completely different situation with Quick Clot or Celox, where it does both. You can see the chemical reaction, and you can also see that it is actually soaking up the fluid and making a difference in the fluid being gone and the wound being packed properly. And the thing is, we need it to be able to do both things. If in the body, it'll react to the blood. Obviously, I'm not using real blood. I've done these tests online. My blog has it as well. Because I need people to visually understand that it's not just, because we want like the high-end expensive. That's not it at all. We are asking for what is approved by the Tactical Combat Casualty Care Committee, official United States committee, on what is usable in the field, as opposed to giving us the knockoffs.
Yeah, if someone is giving, you're giving because you want to save someone's life or someone's limb.
Yes.
And so if you want to do that, do that. But like you said, you can't cheap out on it, because cheaping out's going to cost the life or the limb. I think that's pretty much your message on that, yeah?
Yep, absolutely.
So on that wish list, can you identify, like, I know everything is needed. Can you even identify a most urgent?
Absolutely. It's always going to be tourniquets.
Can you explain why that is? I mean, to me, it's duh, but.
Absolutely. Essentially, the main issue is the catastrophic injuries that come from the explosives that FPV drones carry. So what we are seeing is constant catastrophic major bleeding injuries that require the tools needed to stop the bleed. Now, tourniquets are used to stop bleeding on arms and legs. The hemostatic gauze is used to pack injuries that are on areas of the body that you can't tourniquet. So the junctional areas, like say your pelvic area, your neck, or your armpits, where you have all of your major arteries. So you need both of those items in order to stop life-threatening bleeding. So it's always going to come down to the basics. For the guys that are on the front line, they need the tools to stop the bleed. So my top three are always going to be Cat 7 tourniquets, hemostatic gauze that's either quick clot or Stelox, and then we have compressed gauze to go along with that. Compressed gauze is just regular gauze, but it's helpful if you've got a huge wound, and pressure bandages. So these are our things, and they're outlined in the wish list by highest priority, and also by the most need. So, and in general, I do create IFACs for soldiers. So like, that's why there are all the other items that would go into an individual first aid kit on that wish list. But again, all of the stop the bleed items are always our number one need and wish.
Tell me a little about that latter. You said you put together first aid packs for soldiers?
Yes. So they're called IFACs. They're individual first aid kits.
Okay.
And in every one is all the uniform items you need in order to go into combat that will save your life, or at least attempt to save your life. It's going to be your tourniquet, your hemostatic gauze, your pressure bandage, something called an NPA, which creates an airway for you if a casualty is unconscious. Your assorted gauze pads, your thermal blanket, eye shield, pill pack, which has your antibiotic and your Tylenol, and an anti-inflammatory. It'll have your casualty card. It'll have a Sharpie, and gloves, and a pair of trauma shears, burn dressing, and other assorted small Band-Aids. So it's basically, we call it a human repair kit, and that's what we use.
Wait, so these are going to medics in the field, not to all the soldiers?
No, those go to soldiers. Everyone carries
a tourniquet.
Yep. And actually, soldiers need a minimum of 4 tourniquets to go out on the battlefield.
Got 4 limbs.
One for each limb. Yep. So that's the other problem, is we have to be able to provide that many tourniquets for the guys, or at least, if nothing else, the bare minimum is 2. What I would prefer is obviously they have 1 for each limb. That's the standard operating procedure we would like to work from, but obviously resources are limited. So they have at least 1, and if we can give them a second one, we do. But medics carry a whole bag, and it's even more stocked with more. If they're combat medics, they have more advanced tools in there. If it's a CLS bag, then that is just a giant IFAC with extra IFAC supplies. And someone who is trained as a combat lifesaver which is what CLS stands for, will carry that bag for extra resources.
Where are most of the medical supplies coming from?
If everybody, it's I mean that when I say it. So when the phrase "it takes the village" really applies to medical supplies, the way that I'm supplied is through so many different walks of life. I've got surgeons that help from the U.S. We have regular people that are fundraising for medicines. We have hospitals that are donating themselves. We have medical supply companies that give us a discount rate for some of the machines. Everyday people that donate through the wish list. It's quite literally, it comes from everywhere and everyone. I wish I could say there was
I thought you were going to say the EU or France or Germany or something, like government.
No government. Not that I know of. I know that it happens, but I don't see it at my level. My level is completely individual. Is it happening on a government level? Probably, but I don't see it myself. We've seen ambulances donated from governments. That at least I can say I have spotted that.
Yeah.
Machines and other things will go hospital to unit. So it'll be donated from hospitals to medical units and things like that. But other than that, if there's medical supplies going government to government, I don't see that.
So all these medical supplies at the front that you and other medics are using and distributing to soldiers are coming from private donations?
Yeah, it's a pretty big amount.
What the hell? Not that on my bingo card, Rima. Wow. So all the more important for people to help. tinyurl.com/medic-wishlist. It is on Amazon. I know that a lot of listeners to WCPT are wary of Amazon, trying to use Amazon less. I know I am. This is one exception we beg you to make. Because that is a way to get these. How do the supplies get from the Amazon wish list to Rima Ziuraitas in Ukraine?
So, and I want to preface to say that it's not to say that governments aren't helping. The EU might be, but again, I don't see it at my level. Yeah. So that's not something that I'm visualizing. I'm sure it's happening. I just don't see it as a small cog in a big wheel. But in how it gets it to us, we work with a nonprofit, Blue Yellow USA. They're based in Chicago, and they do it by flight, so checked luggage. That part of it gets to us, and then they also do it by
we got to rewind, right? So Joel Ostrow goes on Amazon and orders 5 tourniquets and 5 boxes of the gauze. Hits order, pays, it goes to Blue Yellow?
Yes.
Okay. Then what?
Yep. So Blue Yellow being also a 501c3 nonprofit, so we trust them a lot. They then pack everything and get it ready along with other units that are requesting stuff. So it's not just me, right? Yeah. So they handle a bunch of other units. So once they're ready and they have enough bags, they go with quite a bit of either checked luggage or a full sea container with a volunteer runner to Ukraine if they're going by airline, and that it gets distributed from on the ground to Ukraine, in Ukraine to the medics themselves.
And if we order from Rima's wish list, it might end up going anywhere, right? The Blue Yellow is going to distribute that stuff evenly, or if we order from Rima's wish list, does it get to Rima's?
Rima's wish list goes to Rima. Oh, okay. That is specifically for me. Okay. But those items that come to me, they don't just go to our unit; they go to other units as well.
Sure. So they go based on need, right? Yeah.
Yes. Blue Yellow has its own separate entity for donating to them. If people want to do donations to them to give to the units they work with, they can do that absolutely as well. But my wish list is specifically for me.
So there's got to be a listener who's as big an idiot as I am. If I wanted to include a box of Twinkies, would that get to Rima too?
Yeah, it would. There's a P.O. box. You could absolutely put it. Yes, you could. You could absolutely include that as well if you really wanted to. People have sent all kinds of stuff, snacks, protein, Pop-Tarts, hot sauce, all that stuff.
I was wondering if it came through this method, though, because this stuff, for those of you, if you get on her Instagram or social media, right, like this kind of crap does bring joy, and this woman, like any drop of joy we can get to Rima, like I'm a fan of that. So I didn't realize it could come through the same route. Like that doesn't piss off the people at Blue Yellow who are like, why am I including this? Yeah,
they're also like, I mean, I'm a huge Dunkin' Donuts fan, so Dunkin' Donuts coffee, like any flavor, any whatever, I'm a big fan. And so my friends all know this, and so they'll send stuff to the P.O. box, and like
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I'm a Dunkin' Donuts fan. Sorry, Starbucks people, but
No,
it's
me
Dunkin'
too.
Donuts.
But not the donuts. Those would be kind of gnarly by the time they got to you, right?
It's the coffee. It's the coffee. But no, the Blue Yellow folks, they feel the same. There's a big thing when it comes to morale coming from like something from home, snacks, coffee, candy, whatever it is. Like I had one donor who is a friend of mine. He's a great person. Love him a lot. He supported me a lot at the beginning of my journey and would send fruit roll-ups. And it is insane what you crave when you can't have something, and you'd never eat it back home. It was never like, I probably never touched a fruit roll-up after I turned like 16.
Yeah.
And the minute that like, and I'm like 37 years old, right? Yeah. So like the minute that this guy is like, I'm sending you a box full of fruit roll-ups. Yeah. For a second, I was 7 years old again, and everything was right in the world. Yeah. I started sharing it with my other like fellow American soldiers, and it would make their day. Yeah. And that was like all I needed. And so from that point on, I would always welcome morale boosts in the form of food or coffee or tea, because it made a huge difference, not just for me, but also the people around me that missed home a little bit. Yeah. And, hot sauce, all that stuff, cookies. Like I started this campaign on Twitter because I've got a couple of Australians around me, and their big thing is Tim Tam cookies. And so I literally sent out a I don't know. I was like, this might be a shot in the dark, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I went through Twitter and I was like, hey, any of my Australian followers, like, would it be weird if I asked you guys to send some Tim Tams for some very homesick Australians? Man, I had like 30 packets show up within 10 days. And I was like, and those guys were so happy. And it was like the best part of it. And actually, we have one Australian soldier that unfortunately has lost an arm. And I had just, the week his injury happened, I had one Australian donor who frequently sends Australian snacks. He had just sent a package. I just got it, full of like their crackers, their cookies, like everything, just like short of Vegemite, right? Yeah. And so essentially I was like, and I went to go see him quite literally the day after it happened. And I was like, I know everything is like really wrong in the world right now, but I have some things that might cheer you up. And he just sat there holding a plastic bag full of his own food and just crying. Yeah. And I just hugged him, and I was like, I know. And that's what I mean. Like, it all matters. It might seem really minute and like really just kind of random, but like you never know what's going to help a soldier in the worst period or worst moment of his life. And if we can just like lessen that suffering just a little bit, it makes it all worth it, at least in my opinion.
And you're doing that every day, Rima. tinyurl.com/medic-wish list. Rima, how long, like what's the turnaround time? Like if someone places an order today, on average, do you know, like when does it reach you?
So it depends.
Forget the holidays,
Right. So it highly depends on the volunteers available, right? So we always need volunteers who can fly. And essentially, like, or I should say, the NGO needs volunteers who can fly. And so if they can get somebody who's available for the flight, then it can take anywhere from like maybe every 3 weeks to every like 6 weeks.
Tell me about the flights. I know you said before, like, who's doing these flights?
So it's volunteers within like either the Ukrainian community or American volunteers that want to work, you know, for things on Ukraine. So essentially they fly out with the supplies.
On commercial flights, or like what? Or they
commercial flights.
Yeah. Okay.
Regular flights. So they get regular flights. It's checked luggage.
Yeah.
Everything is done by Blue Yellow.
Okay.
And they fly into Krakow. They're met by people that assist Blue Yellow. So Ukrainians will meet you and then help get across the border, and make sure all the paperwork is in order. And then as soon as it gets into, say, Lviv, it starts getting sent out to recipients. So I get my stuff, other units get their stuff. That's essentially the process. It's just getting the volunteers to fly it over is the big one.
Thank you for that. We've got like 5 more minutes. Is there a message you'd like to give? Anything that we haven't covered that you want people to know about what people are going through, what you're going through, anything at all?
I want to impart that we may not always be in the news, but the war is going on every day. And it's not just at the front line, it's against the people. It's constantly, Russia is hammering us to break the Ukrainian spirit so that it can walk in and take over. And so, as resilient as we are, we beg you not to forget about Ukraine. And remember that we're still out here fighting every day. It's important to remember that Ukraine is holding back a very, very big force of evil. And it's not easy to do. And your help helps us get through it. And so we ask you to remain by our side. And if you think you can help, reach out to whoever you think needs help, volunteer, because, you know, we don't get to turn off our TV sets every day. We don't get to turn off our phones. We can't walk away from it. And you guys, even if you can do that, you can still make a difference. So if you feel like you have the time and the energy to volunteer, do so. Reach out. There's so many different, you can look up Blue Yellow USA if you want. You can look up Razum for Ukraine. There are opportunities everywhere to help out. And we need that. You guys are our voice to the rest of the world. We can give you the information, but you have to run with it to help us make a difference.
I thank you, Rima. I forgot a question I wanted to ask when you were talking before.
Sure.
Are there a lot of Americans? And then B, are there a lot of non-Ukrainians that you're working with on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I'm in the Foreign Legion. So
that's right.
Most of us are foreigners. There are more Americans than you think. And they're fighting, and they're not just in my Foreign Legion, they're in the Ukrainian units as well. There are more than you, it even surprises me sometimes, but there are more of us here fighting the good fight than you think. And it means a lot to us when our fellow Americans are by our side and helping us out. So, yeah.
So some of these supplies that are going to your wish list may also get to other Americans out there.
They do.
Not that really matters, but because it's all going to people who need help.
Yep.
I'm going to do this again. So for those listening, whether live or streaming later, you can get these incredibly, critically needed supplies to the Ukrainian front. tinyurl.com/medic-wishlist. If you insist on not using Amazon, you can also go to tinyurl.com/medic-PayPal, and that will get to Rima for other ways of procuring these supplies. Volunteer with Blue Yellow. Rima, I just want to say for myself and on behalf of everyone listening. You're a hero. What you're doing is beyond heroic. And I wish you, along with everyone else, peaceful sleep. I'm always smile when you post that you've slept, because I know that does not come easily out there. And please be safe, and to you and to everyone that's dear to you out there. Stay safe.
Thank you, Joel. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate you always giving me a bigger voice, and also Ukraine. Thank you so much for that.
Always. Happy New Year. And
Happy New Year, my friend.
And with that, I will sign off. We're going to take a break, and thank you, and Happy New Year to everyone.